Welcome to this special podcast where we are going to look at ECOWAS 50 years on. Can ECOWAS be people-centered? How do you ensure that the organization is able to address the needs of the citizens of different member states? To look at this, I have a panel. I have Professor Iseke on my right and also Ambassador Mustafa, and of course, the Professor Bachili from Senegal. Let me start with you, Professor. How can ECOWAS be people-centered? How do you ensure that ECOWAS does respond to the needs of the people, or people are taken on board in terms of people, member states, taking their citizens on board?
So ECOWAS has been in existence for 50 years, like you mentioned, and in that time, it has gone through different phases of need, depending on what was needed at the time. The initial goal was to enable economic development within the sub-region. Now it is in that phase where people are beginning to question its legitimacy, its relevance, in terms of the value it adds, especially given the current challenges we're facing in a changing world. So I think that there needs to be a move towards the next phase, which is a transformative future, where the organization becomes more people-driven from bottom to top, and that there can be meeting points between the top-bottom and a bottom-up approach. The point being to identify that at the end of the day, the project is about people. Is the platform is just a machinery for achieving development objectives for people. And if people are at the end of that development project, then they must be involved in that process as well, right? So the challenge would be how to devise, strategies, platforms, opportunities that will enable that people participation in not just in decision making and implementation, but also in buy-in, in making people feel that this is owned by them. Because at the end of the day, integration takes place anyway, from at a people-to-people level. It's just for the organization now to put mechanisms in place that recognizes those informal integration that are already taking place, and to make people feel that they are part of the organization and it's theirs.
The keyword participation. Prof, let me start with you. Participation. How do you ensure that people do participate, different sectors of society do participate?
Well, first of all, we must remember that ECOWAS was created at a time when Africa's decolonization was not completed. 75, remember that the Portuguese empire collapsed in April 75. Then started independence for Angola, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, and Cape Verde. ECOWAS is the elder sister of all the regional economic community on the continent. It has played a pioneering role as an organization bringing together colonies from the former British Empire, colonies from the former French Empire, and then the Portuguese. So it has this characteristic. First of all, it has to be consolidated to have these phones together first, which was a challenge for the first time on the continent. And of course, it has achieved a lot in terms of state-to-state cooperation, and in terms of political kind of cooperation, economic cooperation, but also later on, security. We remember that it is thanks to ECOWAS that Sierra Leone, Liberia has been able to go over their crisis, their civil wars, because of the intervention of ECOMOG, ECOWAS monitoring group military. It is thanks to ECOWAS that political stabilization has been able to be put in place for the Gambia, for Cote d'Ivoire, for all these countries in this region who went into political chaos at one time or the other, Burkina Faso and all. So I think beyond that, those achievements, it is acknowledged that all the founding principles and institutions by the AU and the other regional communities stem from the experience of ECOWAS. So we have to put this in mind first. So, of course, a lot has to be improved in terms of bringing together the people as well. But even in that regard, we must not forget that ECOWAS is up to now the only regional community which has been able to put in place free movement of people and goods and establishment on the African continent. So this is fundamental. When we talk about the implication of the people in the process of integration, free movement of people and goods and establishment is key. Today, in West Africa, citizens can come from Niger to Nigeria, to Senegal, to Burkina Faso. In all the 15 countries, you can come and establish yourself, put up a business, and do your activities, trade. So all these are achievements which are very important.
Thank you so much, Prof. Let's come to you, Ambassador. What needs will drive a future ECOWAS, and taking into consideration ordinary people?
Thank you very much. I think that we should be proud to celebrate ECOWAS. Like you have said, like the professor has said, there are many achievements. Of course, there are also many disappointments. After all, ECOWAS is an intergovernmental organization. Yeah. It is the sum total of what the member states make of it. What should the ECOWAS of the future look like? I think that ECOWAS of the future should pay a lot of attention to building trust, confidence, and also the resilience of its citizens. ECOWAS of the future should also take into consideration a fast-changing international environment. Should, like Professor has also said, should also be mindful of high expectations from its citizens, high expectations, and also demanding and restless youth population, for instance. So ECOWAS of the future should itself, as an organization, should reinvent itself to be more efficient, to be, if you like, to have more capable resource, human resource, imbibe technology is very important. And I think that we do not give a lot of credit to civil servants. ECOWAS Secretariat is run by civil servants. The role of the civil servants, the role of the private sector in the future should be very much, they should take full responsibility and also play their part. For instance, the citizens should have more voice, should have more courage to also speak up. Now you're talking about how do we make the organization accountable. It cannot happen from only within. It has to also happen. Elites, the elites in our countries should also reinvent themselves. There should be elite who are more productive, more responsive, because it's no longer enough to just criticize governments. You have to also
come
find
with
ways,
solutions.
Exactly, find ways that you can positively contribute.
Professor Iseke, when we talk about ECOWAS, and not only ECOWAS, other regional organizations, we often hear when there's a meeting of heads of states, in other words, you look at the presidents doing the work and dictating what needs to happen. How can we ensure that it's not top down, but bottom up?
Look, we need to have platforms, like the World Economic Forum, bodies like that will enable citizens platforms where people, civil society groups, even business can all come together, have conversations, but that these conversations should not end up being talk shops. The outcomes of those resolutions, those conversations should be, there should be a way for the ECOWAS to integrate them, those findings and those recommendations into formal structure. So you could call them informal because they are not in the structured modern institution of the ECOWAS. They may not be a decision-making, pathway that will enable, the outcomes of discussions at those forums to be taken into account. But we should have them. That all of these platforms should not just be platforms; they should be recognized by the ECOWAS as feedback loop that goes into policy making and implementation. Because at the end of the day, too, whatever policies the region takes, and we're not really short of the policies, like Professor Batili and the ambassador have said, there are things to be proud of, in terms of ECOWAS. And even if you compare with some sub-regional bodies elsewhere in the world, there's been a lot of integration, politically, the free citizenship movement, which itself is a form of participation, like Professor Batili said. But in the last 10 years or so, the question of legitimacy, within states themselves, have raised issues around the relevance of ECOWAS, not just because of the fact that it's not relevant, but in terms of the differences, the political differences between different countries. Some are more democratic than others. And then it's also economic
and development is not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same. So those are challenges that we need to talk about. And the central challenge for me, and it's a question that we have not really brought to the fore, is the question of states within the regions themselves. Because if the states are doing well, like the ambassador talked about, the elites, the governing elites, if the states are performing in the way that they should perform, it becomes, the state become more legitimate, and then the need for activating, different ideas and different development pathways for young people, innovation, technology, all of those things will now, they will find acceptance at the regional level. Because, for instance, I will stop after this. We have the AU in 2024 came up with an AI strategy for the continent, right? But out of the 50 plus countries in the continent, only 16 have actually developed national AI strategies or plans, right? But then when other countries develop these, they must also factor the role of the sub-region, like ECOWAS, in mandating that countries within the region do this. So there are different ways that we can reimagine a future for ECOWAS, but the organization itself must be flexible and in recognizing the value of all of these parties and creating them.
Ambassador, how do we ensure that ECOWAS is not seen as a club of presidents?
I think this is a commentary on performance, and we hear that a lot even about the African Union. And I think that it is really a wrong premise, because the challenge for non-performance is not about whether the presidents meet every year and for photo opportunity, but the challenge is that of implementation, because these meetings actually start from the bottom. Because I have worked in the African Union, for instance. It's more of a bottom-up approach than we like to credit it, because the ideas are generated at the member state level. It goes to the ministers, and then from the ministers is synthesized to the summit. So you could say that the decision making, if you like, is from bottom to top. But what has always been a problem is the implementation of these good programs. And ECOWAS, for instance, as Professor Batila has said, has the very good, if you like, credential of having very good programs.
Good track record.
Good track record of also implementation. So the problem is more of implementation. Look, one of the utility of a regional organization, it's power to convene political leaders. It's institutional memory. It has the memory. It has also, like you initially said in your introduction, to integrate and come up with common strategy for everybody. So ECOWAS and regional organization and integration does that. They say there is safety in numbers. What really we need to focus on how to implement these decisions, these good decisions that we take. And there are many reasons why we do not implement our decisions that we sit down and agree. Some of it has to do with the kind of leaders we elect, the kind of people we appoint to, capacities of people who are running. But most important, the type of leaders and the kind of pressure. That's why I was speaking about the elite.
The elite, yes. In terms of ECOWAS leadership, how can the leaders ensure that they are not seen as a club of the privileged leaders, but also the organization and the leadership is there to serve the people?
Well, for any organization like ECOWAS, regional organization, intergovernmental organizations, of course, leaders, when they come together, they try to find a consensus on some major issues. We have to it's not just in one country where processes are different, procedures are different. First of all, I agree that with both Prof and Ambassador, but there is a need to improve ECOWAS in many ways. I had a privilege to have been a member of ECOWAS Parliament for one term, 5 years, from 2001 to 2006. For instance, Parliament is not up to now a regional legislative body. As a member of Parliament, I was chair of the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. When we discuss the issues of environment, natural resources, the depletion taking place, the environmental disaster taking place throughout the region, the sub-region, we came up with a set of recommendations which ought to be integrated in the legislative system so that every state government discussing with companies, multinational corporations interested in natural resources will abide by those environmental laws. But since the Parliament had no legislative powers, we could not implement them. As she said, there is this issue of implementation. And also on conflicts. I was also a member of a committee on foreign affairs and security. At that time, we partner with civil society organization, Mano River Union Women, democratic other civil society organization, and we undertake missions, what we call parliamentary diplomacy, in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, in the Gambia, etc., etc. Again, it is important in the deliberations of the of ECOWAS at parliamentary level, but those recommendations stemming from those missions be implemented through due process of law.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are all these issues. I must say also, ECOWAS has this unique situation as a regional organization. It through the community levy, it is able to finance most of its activities,
which makes it sustainable.
Sustainable, more than even AU. We have been trying to put this on the agenda of AU, but up until now it is not applied, it's not implemented.
As you indicated that most of what AU is doing is perhaps taken from what ECOWAS has been doing. Let's go back to you, Ambassador. The ordinary people themselves, how can they integrate? Can it be a process where you see people themselves integrating and not only looking at trade organizations or looking from trade perspective, ordinary people?
I mean, it is a cause of the people, after all, isn't it? But you know, there is a lot of challenge on the continent, and this is not only in West Africa or ECOWAS, because you're looking at citizenry that is either, the majority is either in the rural areas, and so you need the civil society, you need the non-governmental organizations, you need enlightenment, you need for people to even know of the existence of the services of what ECOWAS can do. So there is that challenge on the one hand of mobilizing, of outreach, of even giving the people voice. And when they have the voice, they have to also be able to have common fronts to this thing. And then with the elites, there is a lot of disillusionment. There's a lot of indifference, if you like. People are not willing. But those are the challenges. But what is so good is that our people, there's so much cultural affinity. So our people, with or without government, are carrying on and doing a lot of trading, for instance, the border communities, even though some of the challenges of security, of insurgency is also at that border community. So you cannot do without some form of governmental organization, some directing, some data. Data is very important.
Very important.
Very important for you to have data of who is where, what is required for the needs of the people to be, if you like, for government and decisions to be inclusive. That has always been a major problem. But I think at the grassroots level, at the community level, especially at the border level, the trader, the woman trader who crosses Benin, Lagos access, has her own distance. Of course, sometimes even the government serves even as impediment, because at our borders all the kinds of things that happen. We want to have a one-stop border. We have quite a lot of I don't want to bring in this controversy of corruption, of high-handedness of security and immigration and all that. So all those challenges are there. But what I'm trying to say is that the citizens themselves are doing quite well. So if you like, it is we, or it is the government, it is ECOWAS and all its institutions that are put to facilitate, because ECOWAS is to facilitate for trade to happen, for peaceful cross-border trading, resilience at the border communities. So all of that, and trade in goods and services, free movement. We are to facilitate all of that. And sometimes, really, I must admit that sometimes the problem comes from the organization itself. The citizens are doing very well on their own, I must say.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Prof, let me come to you. The citizens in this region or in ECOWAS, can the regional integration truly mean freedom for citizens, not just trade and bargaining for elites? In other words, just elites talking about themselves and them benefiting, but just ordinary people or citizens, that regional integration, can it translate into freedom for people?
Yeah, but if I can just make two comments to the previous question you were asking, and my second comment to kind of answer this question. We've all around this table agreed that implementation is a problem. But the question is, why is that a problem? Right? Why is it? We're not short of the policies, the frameworks are in place, but the implementation is a problem. It's a problem because of the lack of political will to actually implement this. Why is there a lack of political will? For me, my own theory of it is the absence of social contracts in the continent between citizens and states, where government understands clearly what its responsibilities are. Because once it does that, we will not need to preach or have conventions and meetings or meetings, to understand that we will do better as a group than as individual states, especially in a world order now where you have a transactional president in the United States that prefers bilateral relations. And in those bilateral relations, they just cherry pick small countries and play us against one another and get what they want. So what I call regional group hegemony is something that we can aspire to. But you can't have regional group hegemony if you don't have common African positions like the ambassador was saying on some of these issues. That's what the missing link. But we need to go back to the question of political will, the question of fixing our state systems in terms of social contracts that make leaders to understand the need for solving problems at home, and then leveraging the advantages that platforms like ECOWAS gives. To the question of you asked, like the ambassador said, this is already taking place, the citizens themselves. She mentioned cultural affinities within the region. Okay, and we can also talk about the need for us to begin to look at our soft power resources in the continent. If you go around, even just West Africa, I came to this conference from Kampala. I was pleased to see that in Kampala, in East Africa, and I've seen this in Tanzania, you would see West African movies, music, playing all over the place, and people, talking about how their marriage worldview, their religious worldview align with what they're seeing through those movies, so they can identify. So people need they need to be more enlightened, and some of these things need to be put forward in terms of the similarities between people that's already taken, so that we can begin to talk about a Pan-African identity. Okay, starting from the region, and ECOWAS can take the lead, like Professor Batili said. The ECOWAS is the oldest, regional economic community in the continent, and it has achieved quite a lot. It can leverage all of these, ensure that we move to this next phase of actually including people, and creating those integrative platforms and making them work.
Well, the other issue before I move to the ambassador and the professor. Without a strong ECOWAS embodying the principle of the people and also driven by the people, what can hold ECOWAS? Is there a possibility that ECOWAS can hold without involvement of people?
Well, it can't, because it's supposed to be about the people anyway. The ultimate goal is to enable development of the people, integration of the people through not just politics or trade, but also that identity, the cultural affinities that bring people together. So that cannot, it's not possible for ECOWAS to do that. However, you speaking, when you say what can prevent it, you're talking about challenges. I know Professor Batili mentioned that with the ECOWAS funds majority of its project by itself, but it still has funding problems. And it's making it look at foreign partners now, especially in this current world where you have multiple donor partners willing to come in from different previous ideological divides. And it's a challenge for ECOWAS the states now to find ways to engage in, hedging, strategic alignment to ensure that you can do and deal with East or West, so long as you maximize your interest. So funding is a problem. I also know that the capacitation, the ECOWAS Secretariat needs a much more capacitation than it currently has. Part of the reasons for the poor implementation also is the lack of capacity to actually implement some of the decisions that have been taken, apart from the lack of political will. So these challenges, whether they be institutional, whether they be financial, and of course the duplication of frameworks, are things that can hold ECOWAS from actually achieving the next leap to a transformative era that is more inclusive of people and where people really participate across all levels.
Can West Africa stand together without a strong ECOWAS driven by people?
Simple answer, no. It's a human organization. You definitely need some governance. Somebody said yesterday at the meeting that we are living a modern state society where you really cannot do away with governance. What you need is good governance. Governance that is accountable, transparent, and governance that is inclusive, so that it's governance that also meets the yearnings of its people. So no, ECOWAS was a good idea and is still a good idea, and a lot of the challenges as enumerated by Professor are surmountable, and a lot of the good works are doable. I want to still go back to the issue of it depends on the leaders you have. And it depends on the citizens themselves doing their own civic this thing. We tend to look at only the top. When you in Nigeria here, for instance, we look at one man, the president, and everybody else takes no blames. All the blame sharing is put on the doorstep of this thing. We as citizens, we have a role to play. The private sector has a role to play. He was talking about the new international environment. No one is, people are no longer, everybody who used to give money for peacekeeping, for peace building, all these people also have their own issues these days. He mentioned about money drying up. Unfortunately, some of drying up happen to have a lot of consequences, a lot of effect, especially in the health, some of the development assistance, some of the aid that was coming to the continent. So this is good and bad, because it's good in the sense that when these things are drying up, it means we have to buckle up, we have to be independent, we have to find our own internal African resources. And there is a lot of African resources. You spoke about ECOWAS of the future. I think ECOWAS of the future must concentrate and invest in trying to generate its own resources, not only for independence, not only for reducing the dependence on foreign financing that is drying up,
yes.
but because it makes a whole lot of sense. And in that too, we have the CFTA, which is supposed to increase inter-African trade. So there are so much good ideas, so much good programs, so much good infrastructure that we have put in place. We really need governments that will do that. We need citizens that will also do their part. We also need, if you like, to hold our governments, leaders, and ourselves accountable. Everybody has to come to the table. These days, the African countries, the island countries, small countries, talking internationally and in trade and in finance, going it alone, they do not stand a chance. But they have a chance because regional integration is a force multiplier, especially in today's world. So no, there is, for now, we don't have anything better than the ECOWAS. We just have to make it work.
Prof, without a strong ECOWAS embodying the principle of people and driven by the people, what can hold West Africa? Is it even possible?
West Africa is together. When you look at the history of this region, it has been a history of integration, political integration through kingdoms, empires, which lasted centuries. When you look at the empire of Ghana from the 4th century to the 11th century, the empire of Mali from the 13th century to the 16th century, the Songhai Empire, the 16th century. You look at Kanem Bornu. All these empire and state have integrated people. So West Africa has, throughout its thousands of years of history, been going through a process of integration, cultural integration, political integration, economic integration. There is no way government can overlook this. First of all. Secondly, even today, in spite of all the shortcomings of ECOWAS, its weaknesses, when you look at not the official statistic will tell you that maybe we have less than 13% government interstate trade, but the invisible trade.
Informal.
When you go informal, when you go in the border area, you will see
that
the magnitude of invisible trade. Women at the border. You go to Dakar market. You ask any tailor in the Dakar markets. You will ask them, where are your clients from? They would say Nigeria, Ghana. You see? Where you go to a kind of, to look to people building any kind of house or whatever building it is. You will tell them, where are you from? The bricklayer will tell you, I'm from Benin, I'm from Senegal, I'm from this and that. So you go to Abidjan, you go to Cotonou. In all these markets, the market reveal the intensity of integration. So governments are compelled to look at these realities. I always say that any government has to make its policy on the basis of the constraints and opportunities of the history and the geography. History and geography compel us to remain together. There is no, whatever government, of course, today we have a problem with 3 countries, the AES country, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. But I look at this as a kind of transient, transitory phase. They have political differences with 12 others, but fundamentally, they want to remain. Because first, the 3 AES countries, when they decided to break up, they said, we break up, but we want free movement of people and goods to remain.
To continue.
to continue. Which is a sign that they know particularly, but perfectly well, but there is no escape from this constraint of history and geography, these opportunities and constraints of geography and history. So we are forced to remain together. So in the coming period, I think ECOWAS has to improve institutionally, to improve its capacity, as Prof said, in terms of the functioning of a commission. There is a lot to do to have more capacitated people. And as you say, we need a new ECOWAS on the basis of the lessons learned over the 50 years. But definitely ECOWAS is indispensable for the country of this region, for the people of this region. The people are more
eager.
They want more and better ECOWAS.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Iseke. Thank you, Ambassador Mustafa. And thank you so much, Professor Batili. Well, it is clear regional integration is quite important, and a strong region will always translate into a better region, particularly for the development of its people. But above all, these regional intercontinental organizations are quite important because they will be able to strengthen the continent, but they must always be people-driven. And therefore, 50 years on, ECOWAS is still here. ECOWAS will continue. However, the regional community bloc will have to adapt due to the challenges we are facing on the continent and around the world. Thank you for your time.